What is going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here, and thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. We're going to be going POV style as we work on this 2016 BMW F25 X3. Today on the X3, we're going to be covering how to replace your rear brakes. And on the table over here, we have a kit which is available on fcpro.com that features 2 Zimmermann rotors, a set of pads, some new set screws, a ball wear sensor, and then we've gone ahead and added some new caliper bolts. Sometimes the pads will include the hardware for the calipers. It all depends on the brand. We have a bunch available on the website, but today we had to add a couple, so we got those on the table. We'll link those in the description below for you. And all new pads come with new anti-rattle clip hardware as well. Now, typically these are going to last you anywhere from 40 to 60,000 miles. It depends on how you drive. The rear brakes do a little less work than the front, so they tend to last a little bit longer. But we just wrapped up our front brake DIY on this car, so now we're going to go ahead and complete the job by doing the rears. So we'll take you along the way. But before we go ahead and do all that, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, we'll be using a 1/2 inch and 3/8 drive torque wrench. We have a 1/2 inch and 3/8 drive ratchet, a 13 and 15 millimeter wrench. We have a 17, 2 different 16s, a 13, and a 6 millimeter. Same one again. Same one again. We have a 17, 2 16s, a 13, and a 6 millimeter hex. We have our piston retracting tool. We have a big hammer in case our rotor is seized to our hub. And then some nice to haves are always electric tools, a paint pen if you want to mark everything after you've torqued it down, a flashlight, some brake clean. We have some liquid moly ceramic paste, and then either a wire wheel or wire brush. If you're working at home, just make sure you have a floor jack and a jack stand so you can work safely. Now let's head over to the lift and get started on this DIY. All right, before we get started on this DIY, heading over to the driver's side of the cowl on the F25, we want to find our brake master cylinder. To do that, you're going to lift up part of this weather stripping seal, pull this little notch forward. There is a squeeze tab here that you're going to squeeze and pull up on, and that's going to give us access to our brake reservoir. What we want to do here is monitor the brake fluid. As we compress the piston, it's going to cause the level in here to rise. So just keep in mind, if the reservoir is too full, you might want to remove the cap and extract some of the fluid before you do this brake job. Another alternative is, instead of releasing the fluid from here or the pressure from here, you can go to the caliper, break the bleeder valve, and let the fluid go out that way, which we'll also talk about once we get back there. But for now, just be mindful of that. Whenever you do a brake job, you don't want to overpressurize this and cause a leak. So let's go ahead and hop inside and work on retracting our electronic parking brake. All right, inside the X3, we're going to use our MaxiCheck 808, as we mentioned at the beginning of the video, to get our rear calipers in a service position. Without pressing your foot on the brake pedal, you're going to hit the key button until your cluster illuminates as if you were about to start the vehicle, ignition switched on. We have our auto hooked up underneath the dash. We'll go ahead and select the service option. We're going to look for the electronic parking brake symbol. We'll find BMW, automatic selection. We'll hit read. That way it'll pick up the VIN and it'll select the car for us, basically. Hit OK. If this looks correct, you can go ahead and confirm it. We're going to do the hot function key. We'll do parking brake workshop mode. Right now we want to activate the installation position, so we'll hit F1. It says the activation installation position function has been selected. Release parking brake. Operate the foot brake and then press the parking brake button. You should be able to hear that in the rear. With that, we know the parking brake has been retracted. And hit continue one more time. And then we're just going to let this hang out here until we complete our brake job on both sides of the vehicle. And when we're done, we'll come back and we'll use the F2 key to wrap everything up. So with that situated, let's head over to the back wheel. All right, my good people, today we are working on the rear right wheel of the F25. However, the steps are going to be identical for the driver's side and passenger side, with the exception being that this passenger side has the wear pad sensor located on it. So front axle on the BMW's driver's side, rear axle, you're gonna have it on your passenger side. So we'll cover how to replace that as well. But to get started, we have 5 17mm lug bolts. Right now we have our lug bolts off. Our wheel is held on, most likely due to galvanic corrosion. We'll work that off, no problem, we'll clean that up. Now we have a better view of what we're working with. So the first thing we're gonna do before we do anything else is work on breaking that set screw free. The last thing we wanna do is work on drilling that out or anything. If you're concerned with it being seized in, use a little bit of penetrating fluid. You're gonna grab your 6mm hex, get that in place. The key here is to make sure that bit is all the way in. You don't wanna strip that out. If you have a hammer handy, go ahead and give it a couple taps. Really work some of that corrosion free by doing that. All right, I won't remove that just yet, but that'll be nice and free for us to continue on. All right, now we have our set screw freed up. Before we work on removing the caliper, we're gonna work on disconnecting and undoing our brake pad wear sensor. If we see the sensor comes out of our pad, inboard pad always, it's gonna run up the back of the caliper. There is a small retaining tab right there that holds it in place. You have one more here by the electrical connector that holds it in place as well. Following that through the back, we have one small clip here that we're gonna use a flathead to pop open gently. You don't wanna break it. That'll release that. We can pull that out of there. And then we have one more tab right behind the shield here that also holds our speed sensor in place. Following that up one of the lower control arms, we have a couple more tabs to release. Use a small flathead to free that up. We got 2 of those. And we can continue to undo our sensor. And then following up top here, we have a small junction box and one more bracket that locates the cable in place. With that, we can pull the cable out of the bracket. Then we can pop our junction box open, 2 small tabs at the bottom here. We have one on the side and on the other side. There we go. Then we can go ahead and pull the sensor out. We get the electrical connector, rotate it around. We have a small release tab. Simply press and pull. And with that out, we can go ahead and start routing our new brake pad wear sensor in. We'll start by connecting it first, making sure that the little locking tab is facing the same direction as our release tab. Just like that. And we'll feed it back into the housing here. And we'll feed it up into this locating bracket as well before we close it up, just to make sure everything sits nice and happy in there. Then we can close this back up. Beautiful. And then following the way it came out, we'll go ahead and lock that into place. Lock. Lock. You want to make sure these thicker portions, one's going to go on the outside of the first clip and one's going to go on the outside of the clip closer to the rotor. Then we'll route it back here on this retaining bracket there. Then we have one more plastic locking bracket there. Lock that in. And then traditionally there's one up top here on top of this lower control arm Obviously this one has been broken off at some point, but it's a pretty snug fit. We're not too worried about it dancing around. We'll lock it into our connector here for the electronic parking brake, and we'll just let it rest for now. If you want, you can go ahead and pull this old one out of your way, but just note it always goes on the inboard pad. This one's still in really good shape, but these are inexpensive enough where we just recommend you replace them. All right, now that we have that situated, let's work on removing these two 13mm bolts that hold our caliper into place. We're going to use a 15mm wrench to counterhold. You shouldn't be very tight. There may be some Loctite on there that's going to make them feel tight, but once you get past that, they should come out pretty easily. With those two removed, now we can work on working our brake caliper off the carrier bracket. And then on these cars specifically, there is enough slack and everything. Actually, we'll go ahead and pull off that brake pad wear sensor from the electronic connector for now. But we can just go ahead and rest everything just like that on top of our shield or lower control arm, whichever one you can get best. That way there's no tension on the line or our electronic harness going to the electronic parking brake, and everything can just kind of hang out. While I have you here, this will give us a good view of our piston, and we're going to go ahead and work on retracting that now. We're going to use a piston compressor tool or piston compressing tool like we mentioned at the beginning of the video. However, you can probably get away with doing it by hand should you not have the tool, but this just makes life so much easier. C-clamps work as well, but the only issue with those is you have this plastic body on the back of the caliper for the electronic parking brake. You may risk damaging it. Another thing worth noting while I have you here is if you don't have the autel, like we mentioned at the beginning of the video, you can remove the Torx bolts that hold this electronic motor to the caliper and then use a T45 to manually retract the mechanism back into the body there. However, sometimes that may cause a warning light, especially if the car isn't aware that you're doing that since you're not using a scanner tool. So while you can physically do it, don't recommend it, but it is an option if you are in a pinch and you don't have an electronic scan tool that can handle that. Now we'll work on removing our old brake pads. These are just going to pull out, just like so. These weren't bad, but since we're doing the fronts, we're going to go ahead and do all four corners on this vehicle. Now we have our caliper out of the way, we have our brake pads out of the way. We're going to work on removing our caliper carrier, which is held on by two 16mm bolts. So we'll go ahead and grab our 1/2" ratchet, and we'll grab our 16mm socket, and we'll break those off. We have our caliper carrier. We can pop off these old anti-rattle clips. We have new ones that come with the pads. Just pay attention to how they're installed. They really only go one way, but it doesn't hurt to make a mental note of how they were on here. I'm just going to prop them off with a small flathead screwdriver. And we'll take a wire brush and clean them up. Now we can work on removing our rotor. I know this is going to be seized on just based on the amount of corrosion, galvanic corrosion that's sitting here on the end of the hub. We're going to go ahead and grab our hammer. We'll also throw a lug bolt back in just so that this doesn't fall on us and crush our feet. Especially if you're working on the ground, you don't want this falling on you or your face. Now we broke that free, we can pull our socket out and our rotor set screw. Again, we're replacing these as well, so we're going to just chuck this old set screw. And we'll take our liquid moly ceramic paste and we'll decorate the hub here so that our new fresh rotor doesn't seize to it like this old one did. So with that ready to go, we'll grab our rotor, we'll grab our new set screw, and we'll set that into place. I'm also overkill with this. I like to add a little bit more paste to the seat of where the set screw is going to go so that it doesn't seize to the hub or the rotor. Take our 6mm hex, just get it started by hand. Now we'll grab our ratchet and we'll snug it up. For those of you following along at home, the torque spec for this is 16 Newton meters. Today I'm just going to use the old calibrated wrist to snug them up, but 16 Newton meters will be your friend if you have the torque wrench. Now that we have our rotor situated, we have our set screw situated, we can go ahead and reinstall our caliper carrier bracket. So let's do that. Now we can go ahead and get our bracket into position. And get our hardware started by hand. Now we'll grab our 16 millimeter socket. Again, I'm using the 1/2" wrench for this, and we're just going to snug them up, and then we'll torque them down properly. Now we'll grab our torque wrench, we'll set it to 110 Newton meters, and we'll torque down our 2/16. All right, my good people, next we're going to work on installing our brake pads into our caliper carrier. The inboard and outboard are going to be the same. Simply take a little bit of your grease that you're using. I recommend the liquid moly ceramic paste. We'll go ahead and coat the ears of our pads just a little bit. Here's the other pad just to show you they're both identical. We'll go ahead and feed that into our carrier here. There's one. We'll do the same with the other side. And we'll go ahead and feed that one in as well. Beautiful. With that situated, we're going to make sure our guide pins are pushed in, and we'll work our caliper back on. You want to get the top started, and the bottom will swing right over, just like that. Don't worry about the brake pad wear sensor. We can do that at the end. But now we'll take our 2 new 13 millimeter bolts. Again, these are preset with some Loctite on them already. Then we'll take our 13 and our 15 millimeter wrench and snug them up. Again, you can use a 13 millimeter socket. We're going to use that to torque them down. But I like using these ratcheting wrenches just to kind of speed things up a bit. Now, I'm not going to get my 15 situated all the way in, as the caliper will pinch it against the little backing plate on the counterhold nut. So I'm just going to try to use the ends of it just to keep it from spinning, and leave it just half on so I can then pull it out when I'm done. Now we'll go ahead and torque both of these down to 35 Newton meters. All right, now let's go ahead and finalize our brake pad wear sensor. Again, this would route over the top to a clip here that no longer exists. We're going to feed it in to our butt of the electronic connector there for our parking brake. Then we're going to pop this bleeder cap open. We'll take the rest of our cable and feed that into the lash retaining tab on the caliper body itself. And that's going to conclude our brake pad wear sensor pad and disc install. Let's go ahead and grab our wheel and finalize this DIY. All right, now we have our brake caliper situated. We have our brake pad wear sensor situated, everything nice and snug and clean. We can go ahead and reinstall our wheel. So we'll go ahead and do that now. All right, we'll go ahead and set our torque wrench to 90 foot-pounds, or 122 Newton meters. We'll go ahead and snug all these up in a cross pattern, or star pattern, if you will. Now we have that situated, let's go ahead and hop in the X3, and we'll wrap up the Autel services over there so that we can put our parking brake back into the correct position. Now, back at the Autel, we can hit F2 and do deactivate the installation position. So we'll hit F2. The deactivate installation position function has been selected. In the next step, the parking brake button will be reactivated. Check the function on the parking brake. For this purpose, the following steps must be carried out. So we're going to set the parking brake by pulling up. Lights on, we heard it actuate in the back. Then we'll release the parking brake. And then we can go ahead and hit continue. And with that, we'll go ahead and give the button one more try. We'll go ahead and initiate our parking brake. We'll go ahead and disengage. And we can hear it actuate and disengage in the rear, so we know it's all set. And with that, my good people, that is going to conclude this DIY. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, or there's a specific job you want to see us do on the F25 platform, leave that in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.